picture yourself at 12 years old. Right now, your biggest concerns might be an upcoming math exam, a classmate you secretly like, or convincing your parents to let you stay up a little later. By every modern standard, you're still a child. Now imagine stepping back 10,000 years while staying exactly the same age, the same body, the same developing brain. But in that world, you might already have been married. You might already have been expecting a baby, or even caring for a child of your own. And to the people around you, that would have seemed completely ordinary. Why did this happen? The answer isn't as simple as saying ancient people didn't know any better, or that everyone rushed through life because they died young. The truth is much more complex. It is a story shaped by biology, relentless survival pressures, dangerous living conditions, and social systems built around keeping entire communities alive against overwhelming odds. The age at which ancient people became parents was rarely a personal decision in the modern sense. Instead, it reflected a survival equation operating across generations. In many cases, waiting simply wasn't a realistic option. Before we go any further, there's one common misconception we need to clear up. You've probably heard that people in ancient times only lived to about 30 years old. That statistic is technically true in one very specific way, but it also creates a deeply misleading picture. Average life expectancy at birth was indeed often in the 20s or 30s. However, those averages were heavily lowered by the heartbreaking number of infants and young children who never survived. In many ancient societies, between 1/3 and 1/2 of children died before reaching their 5th birthday due to disease, malnutrition, accidents, infections, or complications during birth. Once someone survived childhood and reached their mid-teens, their chances improved dramatically. Many adults lived into their 50s, 60s, or even 70s. Grandparents were far from rare. They were respected members of their communities and, as we'll discover later, may have played one of the most important roles in human evolution. That changes the story completely. Ancient people weren't racing against a universal age of 30. Something much deeper was influencing when families began. One fascinating piece of the puzzle is puberty itself. Today, in wealthy countries, most girls experience their first menstrual cycle between the ages of 12 and 13. Surprisingly, this has become earlier over the last century. During the 1800s, many girls in Europe didn't begin menstruating until they were 15 or 16. The biggest reason is nutrition. The human body constantly measures whether enough energy is available to support pregnancy and breastfeeding. Those processes require enormous amounts of calories. If food is scarce or nutrition is poor, the body often postpones puberty as a protective mechanism. Scientists refer to this idea as the critical fat mass concept. While researchers continue to debate the exact biological pathways, the overall pattern has been consistently observed across populations and throughout history. This means that many girls living in prehistoric or food-insecure societies probably did not become biologically capable of having children at 12. Puberty often arrived much later, sometimes 15, 16, or even older during periods of severe hardship. That alone challenges one of the biggest myths surrounding ancient childhood. It's a powerful reminder that human biology isn't fixed. Our bodies constantly respond to the environments we live in, quietly adapting in ways we rarely notice. What seems normal today is often the result of conditions our ancestors could never have imagined. Comment 1 if this changes the way you've always pictured ancient history, but the story takes another turn. Not every ancient society struggled with chronic food shortages. In wealthier communities or regions with more reliable nutrition, puberty sometimes occurred earlier, and social expectations followed closely behind. Ancient Rome offers a striking example. Roman law recognized 12 as the minimum legal age for girls to marry and 14 for boys. That doesn't necessarily mean every girl married immediately at 12. Historical evidence suggests many, especially among the upper classes, married several years later. Even so, the law itself reveals how differently childhood was understood. There was no extended stage called adolescence like we recognize today. Society largely viewed people in two categories. Either you were a child requiring care, or you had begun taking on adult responsibilities once your body signaled readiness. For some individuals, that transition arrived surprisingly early. Understanding this doesn't mean accepting it by modern standards. Instead, it helps us see how dramatically human societies have changed. Ideas we consider universal today often emerged only very recently in our long history. The strongest force behind early childbearing, however, wasn't law or culture alone. It was survival itself. Imagine living in a small hunting band or farming village thousands of years ago. Every year brought unpredictable threats. Disease could sweep through the community. Crops might fail. Predators lurked nearby. Violence between groups was common. Childbirth itself remained one of the most dangerous experiences a woman could face. Under these conditions, every woman capable of bearing children represented an essential part of the group's future. Evolutionary biologists describe environments like this as having high extrinsic mortality. In other words, people often died because of outside dangers rather than simply growing old. Life history theory predicts that when outside dangers are extremely high, organisms tend to reproduce earlier. Waiting carries enormous risk because tomorrow is never guaranteed. If the environment is relatively safe, delaying parenthood can be beneficial. Parents have more time to gather resources, gain experience, and improve the odds for future children. But when survival is uncertain, postponing reproduction can mean never reproducing at all. This isn't merely a theoretical model. Archaeologists have uncovered skeletal remains showing evidence that some girls became mothers before their bodies had completely matured. The pelvis, especially in females, often continues developing into the late teenage years or even early adulthood. Pregnancy before full physical maturity carried significant dangers. Young mothers faced much higher risks of obstructed labor, complications during birth, and death for both themselves and their babies. Nature wasn't being kind. It was simply responding to harsh realities. Sometimes survival demands choices that come with tremendous costs. Looking back reminds us that progress is measured not only by what we invent, but also by the hardships future generations no longer have to endure. Another remarkable piece of this story comes from something scientists call the grandmother hypothesis. It may sound surprising at first, but it has become one of the most influential ideas in evolutionary anthropology. Human beings are unusual among mammals because women often live for decades after menopause. Most animals spend very little time alive once they can no longer reproduce. Humans are different. Researchers believe there may be a reason for that difference. Instead of continuing to have children themselves, older women could dramatically increase the survival of their family by helping raise grandchildren. Their knowledge, experience, and daily support allowed younger mothers to recover more quickly, care for multiple children, and sometimes have another baby sooner than they otherwise could. This changes the picture of ancient motherhood in an important way. A very young mother was rarely expected to shoulder every responsibility alone. She often lived within a network of grandmothers, aunts, older sisters, and other experienced women who shared childcare responsibilities. Anthropologists refer to this as alloparenting, the practice of raising children collectively, rather than leaving everything to the biological parents. That communal support did not erase the dangers of early pregnancy. The risks remained enormous, but it helped make family life more sustainable in environments where survival depended on cooperation. Human history has always been a reminder that communities are often stronger than individuals. Our ancestors survived not because they were the strongest alone, but because they learned to share burdens that no single person could carry. Comment too if you think modern families could still learn something from that kind of community support. It's also important to remember that there was never one single ancient human experience. Humanity has lived across deserts, forests, frozen tundra, tropical jungles, and fertile river valleys for hundreds of thousands of years. Different environments created very different patterns of life. Studies of modern hunter-gatherer societies, which offer useful, though imperfect, windows into ancient lifestyles, reveal something many people find surprising. Among groups such as the Hadza of Tanzania and several indigenous communities in the Amazon, women often had their first child much later than popular stereotypes suggest. First births commonly occurred around 18 or 19 years of age rather than 12. The reasons once again point toward biology. Constant physical activity, lower body fat, and limited calorie reserves often delayed fertility, reinforcing the connection between nutrition and reproductive timing. Agricultural societies, however, sometimes followed a different path. As farming spread, food supplies became more predictable in many regions, even if diets became less diverse. At the same time, entirely new social pressures emerged. Land ownership, inheritance, political alliances, and family status suddenly carried enormous importance. Marriage gradually became more than a personal relationship. It became an economic and political institution. Among elite families especially, arranging marriages at younger ages could strengthen alliances, preserve wealth, or secure legitimate heirs as early as society considered acceptable. Ironically, the invention often celebrated as humanity's greatest breakthrough, agriculture, may also have introduced new incentives that encouraged earlier marriage in certain populations. History is rarely a straight line of constant improvement. Nearly every advancement solves one problem while creating another. Understanding the past means accepting that progress has always been complicated. When people ask why ancient humans had children so young, there isn't a single universal answer. It depended on the century. It depended on the climate. It depended on food availability. It depended on social class. It depended on whether people hunted, farmed, or lived in cities. Yet beneath all of those differences lies one shared reality: the modern concept of adolescence, a long period between childhood and adulthood devoted to education, personal growth, and exploration, is astonishingly new. For most of human history, there was very little separation between becoming biologically capable of reproduction and being expected to take on adult responsibilities. Once the body signaled readiness, societies often guided individuals toward marriage and family life relatively quickly because population survival depended on it. Communities without antibiotics, modern hospitals, vaccines, reliable sanitation, or secure food supplies simply could not afford decades of delayed adulthood. That reality is uncomfortable to think about, but understanding it helps explain decisions that otherwise seem impossible from a modern perspective. It's perfectly natural to feel disturbed when we imagine 12-year-old brides or teenage mothers living thousands of years ago. With everything we now know about adolescent brain development, emotional maturity, and the physical risks of early pregnancy, that reaction makes complete sense. But history also asks us to understand before we judge. Most ancient parents were not operating from cruelty or ignorance. They were making decisions inside a world defined by constant uncertainty, where every generation balanced survival against impossible odds. That doesn't make those choices desirable. It simply makes them understandable. Compassion becomes easier when we remember that people in the past were responding to circumstances, not living with the knowledge or opportunities we possess today. Comment 0. If this story made you see ancient history from an entirely different perspective, every one of us is connected to those difficult choices. Somewhere in your family tree lived a young mother who survived dangers we can barely imagine today. She endured childbirth without modern medicine, raised children without reliable food security, and somehow passed life forward despite overwhelming obstacles. Had any link in that chain broken, none of us would be here. That realization is both humbling and deeply moving. Perhaps the most extraordinary part of this story is how rapidly things changed once human societies became safer. Improved nutrition allowed healthier development. Vaccines and sanitation dramatically reduced childhood mortality. Modern medicine transformed childbirth from one of life's greatest dangers into a far safer experience. Industrial economies gradually reduced the need for large families to work farms or support household survival. As these changes spread, the average ages of marriage and first childbirth steadily increased across much of the world. The childhood we now recognize, a period devoted to learning, friendships, curiosity, and personal growth, is not something humans always enjoyed. It is the product of centuries of scientific progress, economic stability, and social change. What feels completely ordinary today would have seemed almost unimaginable to countless generations before us. That may be one of civilization's quietest achievements. A 12-year-old worrying about homework instead of childbirth is not merely a cultural difference. It reflects thousands of years of accumulated knowledge, improved health, and hard-won security. So the next time someone claims ancient people became parents young simply because they didn't know any better, you'll recognize that the truth runs much deeper. Their world demanded decisions shaped by relentless survival pressures, unpredictable dangers, and biological realities that modern life has largely pushed into the background. Only in the very recent chapter of human history have enough people enjoyed the safety, health, and stability necessary to give childhood the time it was always meant to have. That transformation stands as one of humanity's greatest accomplishments, not because it erased our past, but because it finally gave future generations the freedom to grow before they were asked to carry the weight of the world.